Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality Bridge to a Better Life discussion. During our weekly episodes, we come together to explore the intersection of spirituality and psychology, and as a result, we capture timeless wisdom containing both fields. I want to say that I am super excited to be here with you and Dr. Anahy Fonseca to dive into a topic that touches all of us. It's the idea of the post-modernity, which is often seen together with the ideas that are contained with the collapse of traditional religious framework and also combined with the rise of the scientific, may I call it, absolute thought in predominance in maybe even coupled with the idea of all the materialistic values all packaged together. And when we put it all together, we're left with with the state of quite discomfort, and we in turn are seeking for something. I would say we're seeking meaning in a world that is increasingly more complex each day. And we can talk about, right, Anahy, from the dark alleys of medieval faith, right, that sense of religiosity that is no longer perhaps appropriate to today, but that goes all the way to the sterile corridors of what I could call modern nihilism. So we are here, all of us, questioning what does it mean to truly be alive, to believe, to become whole. Wow. Well, back to you, Annie. How you doing?
Hello, Marcia. Hello, everyone. So good to be here again with you guys. Wow, that's a heavy question. Um, but I think it's so important because we are in our days, post-modernity, we could say, and especially the days that we are living post-pandemic, that it's a big collective trauma that we
Yeah.
all have experienced a couple of years ago, some years ago. But that I think, Marcia and everyone, that we have not yet integrated the experience. We are kind of caught, that post-traumatic syndrome that we say has some
Mhm.
symptoms, and that one of them, for instance, you keep living inside yourself the emotions and the traumas, the memories of the trauma.
Mhm.
And the ego kind of protects itself, has mechanisms of defense and protects itself. So, what we are observing in the collective unconscious, right? It's kind of a lot of issues that are not integrated yet. We have lived together the fear of death, for instance, very
Yeah.
intense fear of death, grieving for the ones that we love that have, died during the pandemic, the sense of loneliness, going and staying at home without, only connecting through virtually, let's say, through the internet and social medias. So we kind of, a lot of children are, we are seeing that were small in the pandemic. My daughter is a pediatrician and she's
Mhm.
also a professor at university, one medical university. And she says that in her practice also, she can see that children are very anxious,
Yeah. Yeah.
very anxious
Very
nowadays,
early, right?
very
Suffering is
early.
what I call is the true epidemic of today's society is this loss of certainty, right? This loss of been centered, a fear has become anxiety, but it's beyond anxiety, it's pathological anxiety at the earlier and earlier age, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And you see, the small children, they count a lot in the stability of their parents,
Yeah.
emotional stability and the stability of the environment. So if you create an environment and if you are part of an environment that is totally unstable and the
Yeah.
parents are with a lot of fear going outside the house, of getting, in the pandemic, we lived that, or getting the
Mm.
virus, and well, all this, even if the parents haven't said anything, the child is like an antenna, it's very unconscious because the ego is just maturing little by little and doesn't have defenses, cannot reason about what
Yeah.
is going on. So what happens is that the child leaves the this environment of fear, of instability, and things like that, of the parents being emotionally unstable.
Mhm.
And of course, they would be, all of us were, in a sense, more or less, um, because we make a collective, right? And we
Yeah.
share the collective unconscious. So, and our shadows also connect with our personal shadows, connect with the collective shadow. So, of course, we all live together. This you talked about the dark ages. It
Yeah.
was like a small dark age that we lived together. We could think symbolically about
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And but
Just
yeah,
I,
go
I
ahead.
hate I hate to just to stop you there, but because you mentioned shadow and we talked about shadow together previously, but just before, for everybody who's here today, can you maybe explain the concept and what does it mean, for example, psychological, but also spiritually, shadow, right?
Okay, so psychologically, we say depth psychology in Jung, it's the shadow, it's like the part in the personal unconscious,
Yeah.
okay, that the ego rejects, let's say, that it
Mm.
goes against our persona, our social mask. They
Hmm.
are kind of complexes, in a sense, subpersonalities, Jung says, our
Yeah.
complexes, small parts, not so small, very big actually, parts of our psyche, complexes. He said emotionally tuned complexes, right? That have memory, they have memories, they have aspects that are manifest, emotions connect to them, and the shadow and the persona. He uses the mask, Greek mask of
Hmm.
the ancient theater. The persona is called the mask. He uses to call this complex our social mask, let's say. And so the persona is related, is kind of conscious and is related
Hmm.
to the ego, okay,
Hmm.
basically conscious, with everything that the ego thinks it's cool. Okay, this makes me better. People will give me likes in the social media, and they
Well,
will
do
love
do you
me for
remember when
that.
we say the duck face where women would just go this the little
Yeah,
pouty, and it's like, what in the world is this? That's a mask.
yes.
You put a device in front of you, and there is automatically the pout in a lot of young women, especially. But
And
that's what's cool, right?
that's cool. And it just remind me that I saw one somebody related to me
Mhm.
that was a beautiful child and has just turned 18.
Okay.
And in her picture that it's in some medias,
See?
of course, she's 18. Then she is all in black, kind
Oh,
of very sexy, and holding, of course, a drink, of
yeah,
course, and probably an alcohol, red or whatever.
yeah,
So that's supposed to be cool. That's
yeah,
supposed to be, and we are talking about external things that you asked
yeah.
me about. So it's very important that we understand which kind of values we are sharing as a collective. That teenagers think it's cool and think it's going to make me look more like a sexy woman or
Yeah.
whatever if I
Attractive. Yeah.
dress,
Yeah.
yeah, in this on that way. And I,
Mhm.
especially if I have an alcohol, if I
Mhm.
have a drink of alcohol in my hand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but of course, if she put that, and I'm not in social media, but people that are and that I have around this age, of course, if she has put that, it's because she thinks it's cool and that her friends are think it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's her persona, okay? And it's just an example. So everything, for instance, that it's opposite to that, and I know some of the stuff about person that I'm talking to about is just an example because I
Yeah.
hear many stories like that. For instance, would be her spirituality,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I know this person when she was a child, she was very spiritual. You can see the self, the higher self
Mm.
there, very spiritual person. But then she was a teenager in the pandemic. And that I
Mhm.
think I'm just giving an example of somebody that I love, that I have seen grow and that I've
Yeah.
seen,
Yeah.
what happens. And I've seen that in another country, this happened in another country where they had to stay a lot at home because of the lockdowns,
Yeah.
very strict lockdowns. And and so then you have big medias and this and that talking
Yeah.
about conflict and death all the time.
Yeah.
I had seen as a psychiatrist at that point very few, Marsha and everyone,
Mm.
very few uh, let's say news or reflections about what was healthy,
Yeah.
emotionally healthy,
Yeah.
and even physical and all this
It's
stuff.
almost like a new landscape, a new vocabulary. What is it? Right?
Yes, yes, totally. So all my fears, all my even for some people, their spirituality, if I'm
Mm.
totally caught in this materialistic world, and Joanna
Mhm.
talks a lot about that,
Yeah.
if I think I'm going to die and there's nothing else after that, so can you imagine the despair if death is outside my door? Is
Yeah.
death is if I hug someone that I love? So
Yeah.
people getting apart from each other, teenagers and children
Yeah.
not learning how
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
read, not the verbal communication, but the what we in our faces, the non-verbal communication, what we the
Yeah.
emotions that we send. We are saying that this generation of
Mm.
children and teenagers in the
Mhm.
pandemic, they kind of are lost
Yeah.
much of the ability to the empathy, to
Yeah.
understand and to
I,
learn people's face, to
yeah.
understand what the emotions they are showing.
Yeah. There is I don't know if you had a chance to see it. I hesitated, but several people kept referring it to me. But there is um, a series being streamed currently, British psychological, we could say, crime drama called Adolescence. That, I don't know if you've seen it, but it really
Yeah.
gets into the complexities, that, just like what you're saying, of that group of people, that youth, and their sense or lack of uh, identity, their pressures that they're suffering. And it's really the plot. Just turn off your phones if you have not seen it, and you don't want the spoiler here. But there's just this 13-year-old boy, and He's arrested for the murder of a schoolmate, right? And it's just a 4 episode, but it is gripping, because it really highlights, how vulnerable this age group is. And they're even more vulnerable because we, and I'm putting collectively, we as teenagers, as adolescents, are drawn into even this world of online, we could call it subculture, right? A subgroup, and those groups of discussions, because of algorithms, to support and to emphasize and to grow for financial reasons, right? There's always a reason to promote and to make more money out of it. But regardless, those subgroups promote really potentially difficult, complex, and potentially wrong ideologies, but they also influence, they shape um, behaviors, perceptions, and in the end can lead to very, very harmful actions. In this case was very specifically, right? And I think that impact of peer pressure, of media, is some of the things where, when you talk about the mask, the persona really comes to play in a heightened state, where with the, with the feelings, or the maybe the PTSD, right? The post traumatic disorder, not completely assimilated post pandemic, and we're talking about COVID-19, it's really heightened the fear of isolation, the fear of non acceptance, of inadequacy, and we keep shaping who we are so that we are based on that online persona, right? We distort who we are to be able to be liked, and that's one pivotal moment in that series. And I, if you see it, let me know your thoughts, when he loses everything, his composure, because he wants the psychologist to just say that she likes him, that's all, you like me, and he just loses. And it's like, how could you do this, and how did you get here, etc., etc. But all overall, it's very much in line with what you're saying today, and it's in line with our post-pandemic world, but it's also in line with this postmodern world that we live today, right?
Yes, exactly. I think it's a very nice example. And if the adults, Marsha, haven't
Yeah,
integrated yet the experience, and integration means to accept
yeah,
the different forces and the paradoxes,
yeah,
right, that
yeah,
happen to all of us, and also finding meaning in the
yeah,
suffering,
yeah,
spiritually and psychologically speaking. So, the concept of the shadow is that everything that the ego think it's threatening to this social mask, right?
yeah,
It rejects, it denies, and it
yeah,
is sends to the personal unconscious. And for Jung, then it creates the complex of the shadow. That, of course, since we, in the transpersonal dimension of the psyche that we call the collective unconscious in Jungian terms, we are all connected and we share all the experiences in this depths of our psyche. So, of course, our personal shadow connects to the collective shadow. So,
yeah,
what happens is that we are seeing all this drama actually
yeah,
going on because, as you said, we have a pandemic in a sense of depression, anxiety, addiction to internet, to social medias, and all of that. We have as we have said some other episodes here,
mm,
that this generation is we have always have had growth of intelligence
mm-hmm.
in next always the next generation is more intelligent than the previous one, and
Yeah,
for the first time in humanity the intelligence of the next generations is going down. So, and everybody, teenagers and children, mostly are losing the ability to write, the ability to read. Now we have artificial intelligence that can,
Yeah.
they can ask artificial intelligence to make text and this and that. So of course we have to use. I'm not saying I'm not against technology. I think it's nice for us to use as ways of growing and not of delivering to technology the power to do a job, let's say, that we are supposed to do as humanity.
Yeah.
So that's evolve in consciousness. So one of the
I
things that
can I just give you, yeah, I'm chuckling here because this is several years ago, so very beginning of what is now here in my professional world, Anahy, AI is becoming now just as omnipresent as what today work is related to the utilization of internet or computer versus, oh, what is it, 30 years ago? Right?
yeah.
Only 30 years ago, where only very few people had a desktop to work. And if you had one, what would you do with it? Right? And today, our lives are completely dependent on those devices. And but anyways, the thought process regarding AI, because you brought it up, was that somebody was explaining how it was a young woman, how she was using AI, and she was actually, because we're talking here about emotion, right?
Yeah.
Basically we're talking about what does this all mean to me and you emotionally, but she was just feeling things and she would go to whatever AI that she was using, and she would say, is this normal?
Yes.
And she seriously, she relied on the answer to, oh, it's okay, it's normal. And we know, right, even the question itself begs to a different discussion in terms of what is normal, what is not normal, and how come can a machine devoid of emotion um, absolve you or provide you a sense of license to feel this way or that way. But it all keeps adding up to this moment in time that we're talking today, right? This great existential crisis that we all falling and feeling and having issues absorbing it. I would say to you, what do you recommend? I think if I put my head as I am Anaïd answering Mercia's question, I would say we all need time to comprehend, to process, right? It's been too soon. Things such as the pandemic, for instance, it's too soon. We will need maybe 10 to 15 years to start processing the impact of that, of the latest of external threats to our existence, right?
Yes, exactly. Marcia, I think it's so important because I will answer um, with, of course, because we are talking about Joanna's teachings,
Yes,
okay? With
yes,
Joanna teachings, I think she beautifully she lead us to deepen our reflections about all of this existential crisis that we are going through,
yeah.
because we know through spiritist knowledge that we are evolving in consciousness, right?
Mhm.
And she says that it's everything that we have that has happened to us, including the light has come, has appeared. When I'm talking about Joanna, see, that's synchronicity. Uh,
I love it.
it's
I love it. I
so,
love it. Yes.
yeah, but it's a wonderful synchronicity because it's
Yeah.
getting dark, then just the lights came on. Um, So I think this is very important because
Yeah.
she tells us, she
Mhm.
asks us to reflect upon that.
Yeah.
We evolve when we integrate our experiences.
Mhm.
Actually, the process of reincarnation is all about evolving,
Mhm.
learning. And she says that living, or she talks exactly, she says a slow liberation from
Mhm.
primitivism.
Yeah.
And through the aspiration that we have, it's an inner aspiration of that we have for the beautiful and the noble, right?
Mhm.
And she also, when she talks about that, she talks about a word that for some people it could be difficult because they never heard about, but she talks about deotropism. That is the
Yes.
movement towards God.
Yeah.
Deo, Deus, like in Latin, so
Yeah.
that it's God, the source of creation, right? God, however people conceive
Yeah.
God. So she says that consciousness
Yeah.
um, can, little by little, in this evolution, this process of evolution, and especially nowadays, are learning how to control aggressive impulses, for instance.
Yes.
This
Yes.
primitivism that we still have from our evolution,
Mhm.
from very irrational beings that we have been in the past, and rationalities, as she says, that little by
Yeah.
little establish itself in the psyche,
Mhm.
helping us to think in a more profound way, to reflect, to be rational beings, and to have this capacity to self-analysis, to
Yes.
ask existential questions: who am I, from where I came, where am I going to? So uh, she says that this is a real power within ourselves, a very strong force that a movement, psychic and spiritual movement, that
Yes.
actually lead us to this search for God, for this
Yeah.
source.
And the,
And
the paradox, if I may, here, because we came from, we discussed postmodernity and the apparent collapse of meaning, right? And it's maybe important for all of us to think that it's not 1, 2, or 3 years, but for centuries we had a sense of our moral compass, our morality dictated externally, right? And in that case, it was religion. Religion forged what was right, what was wrong. It also forged our identities. It offered this map for navigating what we were feeling, in including suffering. And then right now I just keep thinking, what happens when those maps are no longer accurate? They no longer tell us where to go. What happens when the voices, Anahy, from the past, what all the historical reference that we had before are gone or are erased, right? And on top of it, all we have is this noisy, polluted guidance toward consumption, toward conflict, toward egoic choices. And I think this is really important for us to maybe also consider that in this discussion, because is it really the collapse of meaning? Or is it not? It is now the new and urgent time to find meaning in this postmodern society.
wow, that's beautiful. I remember that we have been talking in previous episodes about the archetype of the apocalypse,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's very active in our days because
Hmm.
it talks about death of things that have to die, like old values, like you said. When we
Hmm.
were control, religion was used, unfortunately, in many cultures to control people,
Mm.
like a means to power. And actually, Joanna says that we have to bring back the real meaning of religion, that is
Yeah.
to reconnect to the source. And this reconnection is through actually our inner self, the
Ah, beautiful.
knowledge.
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, it's inside, it's not outside. So this is very important because some things have to die in a sense of transformation. It's
Yeah.
symbolic because we know that from in spiritism knowledge, we know that we never die because we are spirits evolving constantly. So the body dies, the ego is transformed when we go back to spiritual realms,
Yeah.
and it's integrated in the experiences of the self, capital S, our higher
Mhm.
self, our spirit, according to Joanna. And then we go back to another experience of growth, of evolution, and this goes, and someday maybe we are going to be all archangels and
I'll meet you there.
whatever.
I'll meet you there, right?
There we find each other.
Yeah.
Well, actually, at that point in high spiritual dimensions, we are all together because,
Yeah.
of course, we keep some individuality, but then we are in a non-dual dimension. And then
Ah,
we are
beautiful.
don't see
Yeah.
each other as separate
As the
beings.
other,
Um,
right? As the other.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the other.
Yeah.
So like Jesus, of course, brought us this vision that he knew we would only be able to start understanding kind of now when we evolve more in, in a rationality and in
Hmm.
knowledge and in experience. But I think something very important that you said, Martha, and
Yeah.
this archetype is so active because we are talking about existential crisis
Yeah.
and the way that we conquer something that it's meaningful, not for our egos, because this experience, the only thing that is certain, everybody always talks about, is that we're going to die someday and leave
Correct.
the material part of our
Yeah.
experience, even our body, behind. But we will never leave everything that we have learned, felt, experienced. This is all integrated in our spirit, in our wisdom as spirits evolving, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's very important that we understand that we don't get caught. We were
Yeah.
talking about the shadow in this,
Yeah.
of course, that we understand the shadow within ourselves,
Hmm.
and then we work with this shadow. We try to integrate. Oh, okay. I felt fear.
Yeah.
I doubt. My faith was was kind of challenged. My faith in God, in the creation, and but why was that? Which complex was active in myself? Which shadow aspect emerged in the crisis, that one that we felt we were talking collective, but in my day by day, because we have a lot of crises, small one, big ones, in different countries as humanity.
Yeah.
So the thing is to be brave, let's say, brave from our hearts, have faith in ourselves, because we are all sparkles of this beautiful source that we call God, the
Yeah.
creation, the
Yeah.
creator, and understand that all, and try to listen to this sparkle that is inside of us, the higher self, the spirit, that is always trying to communicate with our egos, the small consciousness, that is doing a lot of work here, but has to pay attention, especially when we are mature enough, to the inner voice and to the
Yeah.
messages, dreams, in different kind of insights, for instance, in meditation, during
Yeah.
prayers, and also intuition, synchronicities, because, Marcia, you talked about myth, and Jonah talks also about myth of meaning.
Yeah.
And Jung also talked about myth of meaning, and Aniela Jaffe, that was one of his very close collaborators, especially she was also a Jungian analyst, and in the last 10 more or less years of Jung's life, she worked also as his secretary, and she edited his autobiography, Memory, Dreams, Reflections, and and then she has a beautiful book that is the meaning of myth in C.G. Jung
Oh,
works, and she says that for Jung, and I think of course I can read that in Joanna also.
uh-huh.
Uh, the myth of his life was studying consciousness,
Beautiful. Yeah.
actually manifesting and expanding consciousness, because
Mhm.
the red book, the black books are all about his experimentations. They were not diaries, they are experimentations, and actually notes about his what he called um, his experimentations with his psyche, with his the images that arise from the depths of his psyche, and active imagination, he called this technique. And from there, he simply created depth psychology, what we call analytical psychology, after he had a big crisis when he split from Freud, and it was also more or less around the First World War. So imagine all the collective shadow that was manifest. The
Yeah.
First World War, one of the biggest sufferings of humanity,
Yeah.
right, in modern times. And
Yeah.
look what he says. So first, the Jung's interest in life's meaning, Niala Jaffe says, was due to his experience as a practicing psychiatrist, because he saw the dangers of a meaningless life.
Oh,
So people that are listening to us can connect with the dangers of being caught in this outside world. It's not that we don't have to live, of course, and relate with the outside world, outside of ourselves, I'm talking about, but is
yeah.
that we can disconnect from our inner world. That's the danger, you
Yeah,
know?
and I understand that Jung wrote, right? Christ is the inner man reached by in is the inner man reached by the path of self-knowledge, right? So I think
Yes.
it's very interesting because just like what you refer earlier today with spiritism and also with Joanna de Angelis, um, like the work of Jung, they offer this I could call a bridge, right, to unite science, scientific experimentations, but with the soul, right? So it's this new dichotomy between logic and transcendence, right? It's about reincarnation and meaning in this material life. So it's really cool. Now, cool, everybody, the real cool, to to be able to confront the shadow and not to be able to suppress it, right? To understand all the nuances that we live, each and every one of us that live through, to understand it, to heal it. And I would say, let the light, right, as your light bulb turned on today, let the light shine through, because now you are integrated.
Yes, and you talk about the Christ inside of us. He
Yeah.
uses also as a metaphor
Yeah.
of the self, capital S, of our higher self, because of course, the Christ, and Joanna says also beautifully, is the integral human
Yes.
being, is
Yeah.
the example of the balance and the evolution of consciousness that we can achieve
Mhm.
if we pay attention to our inner world, if we work with what is still shadow and
Mhm.
complex, difficult
Yeah.
complex within ourselves, and we can integrate all this experience. It makes us, it's the opposite of what people think, Marcia. They
Mm.
think, oh, I don't want to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Leave it there in the unconscious because this hurts too much, because I, I feel a lot of ambivalence.
Yeah.
I hate and I love, and this is very difficult. I feel guilty, this and that. But it's the opposite. If I can have compassion towards these difficult aspects within myself, I get
Mhm.
stronger.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
they can exist and I can deal with them, then of course I overcome them, right? Because then
Yeah.
I can tell myself, well, I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
I can work with everything, the shadow that I have, and I can put some light in this shadow. So then
Yeah.
my psyche really can overcome this shadow aspects. But I just want to tell you and everybody
Yeah.
that about a meaningless life, if we are caught, if we are so afraid of what's going to happen to us in our countries and wars and
Mm.
diseases and things like that, and all this fight in politics and all this stuff, if I get really caught, it's not that I don't have to pay attention and make my own decisions. And of course, we all have to, it's the experience of the ego here. But to make some difference to the collective, I have to first integrate and pay attention to my inner self. And then I can make a difference later on that it's going to bring some health and some spirituality to the collective. And Jung
Yeah.
says, to the small sentence that I think it's beautiful. He
Mhm.
says, a psychoneurosis
Yeah.
must be understood, this is Jung talking,
Yeah.
ultimately as the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. And then he goes on saying, about a third of my cases are not suffering from any clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and aimlessness of their
Mm.
lives.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and Joanna also brings this, let's pay attention because Christ consciousness is being reborn within ourselves each time that we just uh, like lose fear
Yeah.
and really integrate shadow
Mm.
aspects, really transform the death in a sense of symbolically transforming all that shadow in light within ourselves. Then we get to another step of evolution and to closer to Christ consciousness.
Absolutely. I love it. We talked a lot today, Anahy, and I just keep thinking that for all of us, let's walk out of here with the knowledge that the so-called existential crisis that we're all going through is not the end. It's just that what can we say? Jonah uses that word, the term, the birth pain, right? The labor pains for bringing something new, and I think that's what it is. It includes a lot of suffering, in especially when, as you mentioned, when we see ourselves, we catch ourselves living in what it could be construed as a senseless or aimless life, right? But let's stop that and just pay attention, because every moment of our lives, all the experience or the emotions that we have felt are now part of who we are, right? So from the ruins of all that chaos that we live through, we I believe that we are being called back by our Creator, right, and all the forces to this new awareness, this knowledge that love, compassion, and meaning indeed are not a, I don't know, manufactured religious belief, but a true human need, right? So I think at this point, and I think this perhaps could be an invitation for all of us to look deeply within and create space, invest in the knowledge that to be aware of our spiritual nature does not mean that we have to not live a material life, right? Or it doesn't mean that we have to escape the world we live in, but be transformative agents. And that transformation, as you mentioned so beautifully, begins with us. This is not about trying to grasp to nostalgic past, but it's really to, like the apocalypse archetype, to be awakened to a future where the divine is not feared or attempted to be masked as lived, but truly lived, truly absorbed, where we are here to transcend all of that. Anai, it is time to say
Beautiful.
goodbye. Do you have any final words? We can talk forever, right?
Yeah, we could, we could. Well, just I will leave everyone with the sentence that it's a synchronicity because
Mm,
I knew we would be talking together. Actually, I was missing you guys. We are doing so many things, right? But it's great always to be here with you. But it's a sentence that I've heard that I think it closes very beautifully.
yeah.
If we could just think, let the divine consciousness be the guiding power of your life.
Ah,
That's the deotropism that Joanna is talking about.
yeah,
Let's have faith in this guiding power that is within us and that connects all of us with the divine consciousness.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. For all of you, and including myself, I hope this conversation really inspired you to take the time to reflect on all of our individual journeys. And I'm going to say until next time, just stay curious, stay compassionate, stay courageous enough to dig deep within the truth inside of you. For those that this is your first time listening to a program, please note that the psychology and spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna D. Angelis, and we hope that you're able to absorb some concepts. They're both spiritual nature, psychological nature, and juxtapose them in a meaningful way. I want to thank you, Anaí, so much for being here. I also want to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spirits Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Spiritist arm for the Medical Spiritist Association. We'll be back next week, and until then, so long, everyone.
Bye bye, everyone.